Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's AZO Network webinar, which is all about culture and branding and how you can create an authentic competitive advantage in a changing market. Now, this is a big, serious topic and one that I know a lot of our audience are keen to learn more about. So I'm absolutely thrilled that for the next hour or so, we have Michele Nichols, president of Launch Team, joining us and sharing her expertise on the topic. Before getting started, just a quick recap on how to get the most out of the event today. We are recording everything, so you'll be able to watch back on demand. When you get this link, please consider sharing your top takeaway on social media or with a colleague who might also be interested in learning more about branding and culture. If you experience any technical difficulties, then a quick refresh is normally your best option, or you can use the chat box to communicate any issues and we'll get you back up and running as quickly as possible. The event today will start off with a 15-minute pre-recorded presentation where Michele is going to introduce the topic and set the scene for our extended live Q&A. We'll be answering questions that you've sent in as part of the registration, and you can also ask any new questions that you may have using the Q&A box on the right-hand side. Quick note, if you're watching this on demand, then the Q&A box is in the bottom right corner, where you can also find handouts and extra resources to support your marketing. Right, we're going to get things started now with the quick introductory presentation from Michele.
Danny, thanks for inviting me today. I'm Michele Nichols, president of Launch Team, and we've been working with science and engineering-driven companies for the last 35 years. We'll be talking about culture and brand building today. This is a bit of a squishy topic, but really it has tangible value to these companies and is very closely tied to the top two challenges they're facing right now. And that is workforce shortage and new sales. People are at the core of both of these, and their behaviors and expectations of companies are changing really quickly right now. In fact, your growth depends on your culture and your brand, and it may be your underlying competitive advantage. Let's define them so that they are a little less soft. Culture is really internal. It is what shapes the attitudes and behaviors of your people, and it unleashes energy and productivity toward a shared purpose. Whereas your brand is external. It's the collective impact and lasting impression that you have in your customers in the market. And it can create a real competitive advantage. It is, in fact, how you're different from your competitors. So are culture and brand measurable? How do we get beyond something that lives in the hearts and minds of your employees and your customers into something that's tangible, authentic, actionable, and measurable? In B2B, brand equity is more challenging than in B2C, but it does deliver a measurable increase in customer lifetime value, your net promoter score, and valuation, especially in a time of such market consolidation. This does, in fact, drive your valuation in the market. Building a strong culture and brand for your work environment is more important than ever. The speed of change is increasing, and that ups the stakes for a strong culture and a brand. Hybrid work environment has stripped away much of the staging of culture. There is no happy hour. There's no ping pong table or foosball table for your employees to gather around. It's the way they interact when no one's looking, both internally and externally, that are your real culture. As we translate that to external value to customers, digitization has changed loyalty from the salesperson to the organization, from the individual to the organization. They're interacting with your company in so many varied ways that we can't control that single relationship. They no longer call and deal with a single salesperson that colors their whole experience with your company. They have a much broader perspective of your brand. We've increased the number and the breadth of the touch point through that customer journey. And so your brand really shows itself through their interactions with chat on your website, through a self-service aspect of your specs, um, and in fact, through their call or Zoom with your business, their QA tour of the facility. There are so many ways that that comes through. So the challenge is to make that consistent and authentic. Let's look at it by the numbers. We can, in fact, quantify this. A strong culture has an immediate impact on your cost to hire, retain, and outperform your competitors. Companies with a poorly developed brand pay 10% more in salaries, and they have to pay a premium. Companies with a stronger employer brand have 43% lower hiring costs and certainly less turnover. And in a public setting, the S&P 500, they outperform their competitors by 122%. In branding, that also demands a premium. They increase revenue by up to 23% through consistency of brand experience across all platforms, and have a higher net promoter score, higher referrals, and lifetime customer value than those that don't pay close attention to their culture and brand. Brand is certainly more than your logo, your look and feel. And the people behind your company can really add stickiness to every aspect of your brand. Sophisticated customers today demand authenticity, specificity, transparency, and a seamless experience. This certainly carries directly over into your user experience, your UI, from any aspect of your digital marketing, your digital customer service. Customers today demand a self-service element that's in keeping with their experience with the company in person, one-on-one. So what do we do with this? First, let's look at current state. It is the why people stay. From culture's perspective, why do great employees choose to join your company and why do they stay? And from a brand perspective, why do great customers purchase and repurchase from you? And once you have a good sense of that, and you can gather that information through surveys, interviews, focus groups, and get a good strong baseline through Glassdoor, social media mentions, and benchmark your market leaders. Then next, you develop where you'd like to be. What is the vision? What culture do you want internally? How do you want your people to interact with each other and with customers? And in the market, what competitive advantage do you want to create? Where is the gap? And then look for inconsistencies. You have some shining examples where the disconnects. Is that by location, department, even seasonality? Are there inconsistencies in your marketing, your sales, or your service? And then create an action plan to address them. This moves it into day-to-day hiring practices, your training, your compensation model. How do you reinforce the behaviors you'd like to see? In a brand, tell the story of that brand promise with specific examples and roll that brand out across channels. We are in an omni-channel marketing and service model world. And so you'll have to look to make sure that you can create that experience for your customer no matter how they engage with your company. And then measure it. What are the outcomes? Integrate those cultural behaviors and characteristics in performance reviews, your compensation, reward for good behavior, and create KPIs that measure the progress, whether that's turnover, employee engagement. And in a brand, you'll also identify those KPIs. How do we measure the impact of your brand improvements? Customer lifetime value, we mentioned, customer ratings, and your net promoter score are 3 good places to start. You may remember this from college, Maslow's triangle of needs, Psych 101. This is a useful way to understand where employees and customers are today and how you can elevate that experience for them. A good brand elevates your customer. A good culture elevates your employee. The pandemic brought some interesting change in experience for everyone. In fact, knocked everyone down the triangle a bit. We all thought more about our personal safety and health supplies than we would have ever before. And so what they need today from you, what they want from you, may be different than it was 3 years ago. Certainly, risk reduction is a table stakes across the board. Employees are looking for job security and their ability to meet their basic needs. Customers are looking for also job security. Are you the safe bet? And regulatory requirements. But those are table stakes. How can we elevate them beyond safety into having a strong peer group, an ability to connect with others, into esteem? How can we help elevate their perception, give them a platform? The strong brand exceeds table stakes. They reduce the risk to the buyer and the employee and help them meet their personal ambitions. It connects them with their personal values and motivations. They are more driven by purpose than they ever have been before. We're starting to hear conversations about sustainability, diversity in a way that's very core to their sense of self. And if you can truly be a part of that versus give it lip service and demonstrate what you're doing about that, then you will share a sense of purpose that builds loyalty. There's a few things to watch out for as you build your culture. First is homogeny. Let's not mistake cultural fit as an excuse for lack of diversity. We're looking for shared characteristics, but that is not shared background. Second, cohesion without conflict. A lack of disagreement and honest feedback can really undercut your culture. People may even need help in learning the skills to have strong conflict resolution skills to have those discussions in a culture that values collaboration. Front of the office, back of the house divides. Often in brand building, the first people we highlight are the people that are visible to customers, the business development staff, management. Be sure to pay attention across the organization. Highlight the commitment and innovation throughout the company. Love my senator, hate the Senate. People are most loyal to their immediate manager. So spend some special attention to consistency of message and vision in that middle management layer, because that's the person they interact with most often. And as we think about the group as a whole, the company, let's not miss people's personal why. Leaders often are coming from a very different place than their employees, and real empathy and understanding is important here. Dig into why they personally choose to be there. There are a number of ways to start to build your culture and your brand, and in thinking about them together makes it a much more tangible action plan. First, commit to transparency internally and externally. Marketing and communications are much more powerful when you cut out the spin. Number two, model empathy. Deeply embedded empathy throughout the organization will foster a better customer experience. Go for the no. In thinking about your brand, what aren't you? That is much more powerful than saying what you are. Represent your diversity honestly. Inclusivity will help you resonate with new audiences and tell a global story, but make sure it's representative. Make sure it's true. And it is okay to talk about what you're going to do about it. Meet the team. Highlighting employees' accomplishments and commitment in social media is a great way to get started. Just be sure that you're digging deep into the organization, that's not just front office. Celebrate the wins. Promote customers and employees in case studies, articles, downloads, and social. What you celebrate out loud is what you'll see more of. So be careful that that's tied to your vision. Put your values in action. Employees, again, are much more purpose-driven than they've been in previous generations. Whether it's charitable donation, industry, or community involvement, make sure your cultural values match your causes. Leverage your external communications internally. That will really drive the brand and culture in a way that's authentic without increasing workload on people. Share your successes and stories with an internal newsletter, the intranet. That can go a long way to building loyalty internally. And build your organizational muscle for change. Change is a constant. It is speeding up. Make sure you've built a cross-functional language and skill base for change management in your company. We have a lot more research on this available. And welcome your questions, but you could also download the ebook available here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michele. If you didn't get a chance to take a quick photo of that QR code, then if I draw your attention to the handout section, and you will be able to find the ebook at the top of there. Michele, we've got about 20 or so open questions from the registrations. We've got more coming in from the presentation. If you have got any more questions to ask everyone, please do feel free to use the Q&A tab. And like I said at the start, this is a massive topic, but we'll try to answer as many as we can in the next sort of 30 minutes or so. Michele, if I may start with the question I had just from listening to your presentation. So you mentioned about the controlling of the single relationship and how it's harder now to control that single relationship, usually from the salesperson to the client. So how important is it for companies to realize that overall and have a plan in place to control or manage those communications?
Well, it isn't a single relationship. It's a many to many. Many customers having many different experiences across many channels. And even prior, could we really manage a single relationship where a customer interacted with one individual who is not a robot and does not behave exactly the same every single day? So it's a necessary and it's a good shift, but it's that many more things to have some consistency around, to be specific in your promise of standard of care and engineer for it so that they really will have a brand experience and come to expect and depend on it. Even in deep tech sites, we're seeing the majority of that traffic coming from mobile. People are multi-device, multi-channel. The referral is from more sources than ever before. So it's a much more complex journey.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of that provision of care, it goes back to the people you hire and having your core values as a company and then hiring people based around those core values.
Yeah, the most important starting point is to commit to empathy, to really getting an understanding of your customer and their needs, and then designing for it.
Sure. I'm sure we could just talk about this one question for the whole half hour. We won't do because we have got a lot of others. And I want to ask you the first question we've got from the registrations. And they basically asked, as a company, they've always nurtured a real human relationship with their customers. And this is definitely features it's been a benefit to them. Is it prudent for them to include this in their brand building, in advertising and social media posts and other areas of their communications?
Absolutely. Well, let's take Azo, for example, because I've many touch points with this company and we're all familiar with Azo. We've seen them on social. Someone probably writes the post that is not the person you call and speak with, but there is a real type. Everybody you work with here is very personable, tells it like it is unpretentious. And so the people are building credibility and trust in the company. So yes, definitely. And they're building trust in tiny interactions, tiny transactions. If you and all of your colleagues tell me that you're sending something, emailing something over, I know that based on past experience, that's today. You don't mean sometime maybe. That just seems to be the culture there. And so people want to connect and they're willing to do that more and more in social media. They want to see the people they know and learn more about them. So you can be very specific as a company in what you hire for, what you reward for, what kind of characteristics that is. And then make great examples of your people. Reward for that by highlighting them, spotlighting them in the newsletter and social media. It really reinforces your promise to the market.
Yeah. Just on the mini experiences you mentioned, because there are so many, how important is it, or how potentially damaging is it? How potentially damaging is it if you get those mini experiences wrong? So if you haven't got a sort of a coordinated communications channel and something that might seem fairly sort of minor, can that be a real damage to your brand overall if you get things wrong?
Oh, absolutely. In the short term, you'll see it in your sales pipeline. Trust and rapport is your first process. If there isn't trust there, you are not moving forward. So you will see opportunities fall out of that. But long term, you can erode a great customer relationship. If there's a disconnect between sales and service, delivery, if you see disconnects in delivering on your promise, your very specific small transactional promises, that's where you lose out.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because now obviously there are so many more opportunities for the sort of mini experiences. So companies have got to sort of be on the ball with their coordinated communications. And the next question is about, they're asking how you can demonstrate brand culture and business values in ways other than a page on the website or marketing taglines, social media posts, etc.
Sure. First, I'd say service commitment and expectations. In a lot of the market segments we work in, it is more important to do what you promise than to promise faster. If you say you'll have this in 3 weeks, that is more compelling than I'm going to get it to you in 3 days, and it turns out to be 5 days. It's consistency in delivery. So be very specific about your standard of care, capture it, train on it, share it widely, internally and externally. Second, I think you need to map your values to your money. You're probably doing it anyway, but it helps to use your resources better if this is how you qualify opportunity. These are the 3 charities we support because it ties closely to our company values. It helps us screen through all the other opportunities. You can then talk about it externally, but it's internally true and in line with your values. Same is clear with giving employees flex time, PTO for volunteer work. Just be clear about how much and whom the company supports and why. Third easy way is to create a contest internally and externally. One year we did a referral contest, and for every referral, that team got another Thanksgiving basket to give to the food card. And they were racing to fill out their tally. They were competing against each other in the best possible way and toward a cause they believed in. that was really effective in motivating them in a way that was really true to values for us. Also, this does not need to come from top down. I would crowdsource this. We have a pro bono program. We agree on the selection criteria together. How do we score and rank which projects we believe will have the most impact and success in, which organizations to support? And so they decide that together, and that streamlines everything else.
Yeah, there's another question sort of on a few of the sort of themes you were talking about there, and they're saying about they organize volunteer and team building events, park cleanups, 5Ks, food drives, that sort of thing. And they've mentioned that they've had low turnouts in a sort of in their first post-pandemic event, which I guess is to be expected, but they're asking for some tips on how they can encourage more employees to come to events and get involved.
Yeah, I think first is understanding what the barriers to coming back are. I wouldn't want to guess. Everybody's having some trouble coming back to in-person, but I don't want to guess why. So I'd survey them. How do they want to meet in person? What are their concerns? And second, I'd broaden your champion base. It sounds like this person takes a lot on themselves, and that's really to be applauded. But they may increase their turnout if they've got some spread out the champions a little bit, get some help with bringing their friends along.
Yeah, it sounds tiring, doesn't it? Team building events, park cleanups. Yeah, just the 5K part made me tired. Frankie, if you're listening, a company 5K, I think we can get that sorted in the future. But yeah, I think it's really important what you said about sort of in the post-COVID world, not assuming why people have got concerns about coming back to the office. And yeah, a survey is a simple way of finding that out and then work it out from there. The next question is, how can a company know when brand recognition marketing versus product-centered marketing with a bit of branding built in makes sense? What are the sort of the key things that they can think about there?
It's a balance. It needs to be both for long-term opportunity and loyalty to keep and grow your customer base. But timing plays in. If you're brand building in a market, it can be particularly important in a new market entry and pre-product launch. You can't quite talk about the new technology yet, but you can tell the story of why, where you're innovating, where the company is going. Build some awareness and loyalty before you can make this critical announcement. You've grown your audience. And then as well as post-launch, how can we turn initial customers into fans of the company? So the other thing to consider is if you're targeting growing your customer base or account growth. Base, I would do more product promotions for that initial new product purchase, that first purchase. And if you're looking at account growth, it's probably more appropriate to do a more branded message.
Sure. Yeah. Really good thoughts there. Our next question is asking about practical examples or activities that they're effective to communicate a refreshed purpose externally to customers and industry. There was a few questions of a similar theme there, so I tried to summarize 3 or 4 questions into one. So thank you for those questions, and apologies if you don't get the exact answer, but I think I managed to cover everyone's questions in that one question there.
Sure, it's a good question. Some of it is why are you refreshing your purpose? Is it simply you're looking your next 3 years out? It's time for the next growth stage of the company. Sometimes you see companies have to come back from some bad press, some damage to their brand. That's a different challenge. But practically, if you're looking forward and kind of saying, where we want to be now in 3 years, 5 years, to reposition in the market, I'd start with the vision. What does that look like? What does that feel like to the customer? What does this feel like to the employee? And then identify the metrics. ESG is more important than ever. What are your sustainability targets? Be as specific as possible. A lot of companies are still in the phase where the goal this year is to set the commitment, Next year we'll measure it. That's a fine place to be, and just be specific. I think percent of budget spent on R&D and innovation compared to your competitors is a meaningful metric if that's your commitment. And then you can take that one step further. Where's your innovation pipeline focused? Is that ultimately a benefit toward climate change, medical research? What is the human impact? I know it's 3 or 4 steps removed for so much of our market, but there is a time to look for those common threads. What are the themes of which ultimately you're working toward? Because it's just as important that your employees' families understand what their family member does for a living and why, and give them a story. Why is what we do important? And then from there, you're looking for those themes in R&D, the impact, telling that story, making an announcement, and be as specific as possible. How's this tied to an initiative, and what's that initiative? I'd name it. It could be a campaign, but you could go live on social media at an important conference with that very specific announcement and start to plan around that. What would the press release be? What is the event that is tied to this change? If you could start to be specific and event focused around your change in brand promise, it starts to get meaningful. It starts to get some meat behind it.
Yeah, just on the so going live, the idea of going live on social media at an event, I can imagine people panicking a little bit, thinking they need to have a sort of Hollywood style production, but that's not what you're talking about here, right?
No. That is iPhone quality, 1-minute clip to make an announcement. I think it is probably more impactful than the old days of having your local politician over for a ribbon cutting ceremony. You will attract a bigger audience, a more qualified audience, in a way that people care about.
Yeah, but you'd only get the politician if you love your senator, though.
That is true.
That is true. Okay, so moving on to, we've had a question asking about marketing more aggressively without diluting the authenticity of their brands. They've basically been developing it over the last 8 years. They want to start marketing more aggressively, but they're concerned about diluting authenticity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a right concern. We do want to market more aggressively. We don't want to break the trust of the audience we have by annoying them, quite frankly. So I would focus on new tactics, new channels, without a shift in style or philosophy. It doesn't mean you have to be pushier, more direct, more annoying. You're just trying to be in front of them in a way that reaches them. So you would tell a different story on Instagram than you would on LinkedIn, for a very specific example. Because on Instagram, no one cares about your new technical paper, but they may care about your new sustainability initiative, like tell the culture story. So if you're adding channels and messages, you won't have to worry about disrupting your usual activities or disrupting your customer.
Yeah. How important is that sort of channel knowledge and having people within your team having the experience on, say, Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is that you're moving into, as opposed to someone saying, "Oh, there's this new channel that's just everyone's using. Let's just throw all this stuff we use over here into there as well."
There's almost no carryover, unfortunately. I wish there was an easier way. So I think in terms of themes and messages, internal, external, there's some efficiencies there, but channel to channel, those are pretty different. What you would talk about on your YouTube channel is different than LinkedIn, is different than Instagram, is different than TikTok. So pick well. Don't try to do them all, and think how they can feed each other.
Yeah. The don't spread yourself too thinly advice, I think, is absolutely crucial, because it's very easy as a marketer to be distracted by the latest tech and the latest channel that's out there. But if you haven't got the resources, you're going to sell yourself short, aren't you?
Yeah. Maybe Instagram is only for recruiting, so you only tell a culture story. That is perfectly reasonable. You're only on there because your employees are already on there talking about you. Perfectly reasonable approach to it.
And then your metrics for senior management are sort of recruitment costs, long lifetime span of employees, et cetera, et cetera. So there's ways of measuring absolutely everything. And before we move on, just a quick note that we have another webinar coming up in a few weeks' time. This is going to be about the state of scientific purchasing. So we've been doing a little bit of research here at AZO, and we're going to be sharing our findings in that webinar. So if you're interested in joining that, you can click on the link that's appearing on your screen in the bottom left-hand corner right now. And Michele, let's move on. So we still got a whole load of questions. We're doing okay for time. So let's see how many we can get through. This is another question about practical examples. They're asking for a showcase. They want to showcase the people behind the brand. And particularly they're interested in promoting the back of house team, which you mentioned a few times in your presentation, which I think is really, really important. So what are some examples of how you can do that?
Sure. I have a client who one of their employees ran over their circuit board with his car and used that as a YouTube video. Dumb stunt, but they were making a very specific point. It was the guy's idea. It came very organically through the organization. Had a lot of traffic and hits on that. So I would say how-to videos, those kind of things are a great way to showcase some of the people who are doing the work. They know the products best. They know the technologies best. I like meet the team in various formats. Customers want to know the person they're working with, and they may not have had a chance to meet them live or to break bread or really get to know a person. So those kind of interviews, whether video or written, do well. I'd broaden your thought leadership, brainstorm content ideas together, bring a larger pool, because then you're interviewing people who are closer to the technology. Innovation Spotlight Day, I have a client who has every intern present their projects. They use it internally first, and then sometimes they use it externally. They get a lot of interest in that. They do the same thing with their entire engineering department.
Yeah, I'm going to make a massive generalization here, but if we assume that the back of house team is less comfortable in front of a camera or speaking in public, what are some of the ways that sort of leadership, marketing managers, sales leaders can help or provide resources to help people who are perhaps a little uncomfortable in front of the camera to be more comfortable?
You and I mentioned earlier, I may lean toward being an introvert, but talking to you is very comfortable for me. So interview format can be really helpful for some people. That works well. To the same extent, if that isn't something that suits them, that same interview becomes written content. You can do a brief Q&A in social media with their picture, and that's a picture that they bless. It doesn't have to be a certain standard. As long as it's in keeping with your brand, if they're most comfortable with a casual, non-posed picture, as long as it suits your standards, it's their image.
Sure.
That should feel authentic.
Yeah. Of course, audio is another way you could do that. If the sort of being on camera is a stumbling block, recording a Zoom call, putting that out as an audio clip, there's another way that you could address that, and something we like doing definitely because we just think it's such a great way to communicate with people via podcast or audio on social. So some good ideas there, I think.
And people are well-spoken when they're confident. So if it's true to their job, their expertise, they'd surprise themselves. I have a quality assurance leader who's great on video because she had to get used to doing FaceTime facility audits. But that's her deal. This is her area of expertise, and she's very confident in it.
Yeah. I guess that's pretty good advice. Just tell them we're going to be talking about what you know the most about. No one listening is probably going to know anywhere near as much as you about this product. So go for it, and I'm sure that will help with the confidence. Talk about environment. So how do you create an environment where you can have constructive, not destructive, constructive disagreement? So you mentioned in your presentation about the need to disagree sort of amicably. How can you create an environment where that's encouraged and people feel comfortable disagreeing?
This is a tricky one. We've struggled with this ourselves. We have really kind, well-meaning people. Teaching pushback has been really important. First, you can designate a devil's advocate. In each meeting, we take a rotating turn. You're in charge of devil's advocate today. It is your job to push back. We set the expectation that pushback is value. This is how you provide the client value. We push back internally to make the end product better. And when necessary, we're asking the right questions to push back to get to a better end result with the client. It's our job. This is what's valued here. It's in the orientation back on day one that pushback is required. It's one of our few rules. Recognize a reward for it. And we have weekly kudos. Everyone goes around and names it. And this is one of the rewards this is one of the activities we need to reward for and recognize. So if we can call out a very specific example of an employee who pushed back for a better end result, that's very specific and very visible. Personality profiles can be helpful. They give a good segue into why people may struggle with conflict. So it gives a common language around it. Like, oh, us C's really struggle to speak up here, but it gives them a language to negotiate with in this. And then this is my least favorite, but it has really worked. Role playing. I hate to role play, but our last corporate retreat had a 3-hour workshop on this because it was one of the things that was necessary. And I have heard from every employee multiple times that it was the most valuable thing they did this year.
That's interesting. Yeah. With the devil's advocate idea, are you assigning that person and then telling everyone else in the room, or are you letting them be an anonymous devil's advocate and then people get comfortable with there being a person in the room who they weren't expecting maybe to starting disagreements?
That would be an interesting psychological experiment, and I would love to try it. But we name it just like we would a timekeeper. Sarah, keep me almost on time. Mary, your devil's advocate today. If you're not here in pushback, that's your job today.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's interesting. Definitely something I'm sure people watching can try out pretty much straight away. There's nothing I can think of that would stop people. A few more questions. So at the start of the presentation, you posed the question about whether culture can be your most valuable asset. So would you say for yourself at Launch Team that it is?
It is. This is a services business. It's a people-centric model of people, technology, process. We're people and technology all day long. It's the only asset there is to the company. And the one thing really necessary for us to be good at in order to scale. Otherwise, you cap yourself out. If you have a few key people that everyone comes to. We're really geared for long-term relationships with clients, long tenure with employees. And in today's job market, if you can keep and continually develop an employee for 4, 5, 7 years, you've got something. You've got that shorthand, that collaboration, and they're striving to be continuously better, then they have a reason to stay and you want them to stay. We're really clear in our core capabilities that we hire for and reward for. For us, those are ability to deal with ambiguity, customer focus, and action. And I know those sound really specific, but they map to the questions we hire for, what we include on their performance review. It's what we're talking about when we talk about culture. And it's given us this baseline for change. We went into the pandemic and everybody suddenly moved home and bringing them back. It's a lot of change, but they have a means of working together toward an outcome when no one can see them working, when everything else changes.
So would it be fair to say that a lot of that's coming from you as your position as a leader? So what's the sort of balance between bottom up, top down when it comes to branding and culture?
It's my job to set it and to talk about it. But the real reinforcement happens at every level. They'll call each other out on it. They'll refer to it when we talk about hiring a new employee or, who should be moved into a new role. So I think it's both. It happens at every level of the organization. It's leaders' jobs to find those pockets of excellence and then decide how to turn that into a forward-looking vision. The culture happens whether you're looking or not. It's just the change comes sort of bottom up and top down.
There's a really interesting question here about understanding your prospects' culture, and they're basically asking, what do we need to know about their prospects' culture so that we can take action in presenting our brands to them? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a good question. I really don't think that you're looking to match your culture and brand to them, try to be something you're not. It's more of a matter of qualifying for whether it's a fit, whether we're a good fit, and how do we identify that? How do we target? It is as much about the individual as it is about the company for that 80-20 rule. For the company, is it a good fit? It's how you qualify whether that is a prospect or not. Do you value the same things? Are your cultural styles and philosophies similar enough? There are some companies and some cultures that are kind of rampant in certain industries that I know are not a good fit for us. Fintech, some other small slices that they can, whether it's maturity of the market or the type of people they attract, the narrowness of people, they may not value who we are or what we do. And so even if we try to meet their expectations, we will fail in service. There are companies that expect a company like ours to sort of bring the entourage, I had a prospect tell me outright that they were going to work with an agency with a really big building. And that was great truth and very clear. I'm not going to buy a building to suit them. So it's a great qualifier. It helps you focus your energy. Whereas you will work with some other companies, even without knowing the people, oh, we believe in the same thing. We are going after the same vision. We probably would serve each other well. On an individual level, do your customer persona and do it by segment. And if that segment, that persona, does not value who you are, you're not a match on values and philosophy, then maybe look at a different job title, a different entry point to the organization. You'll see some surprising, when you start to study it, some surprising trends in the foundations they follow, the causes they support. You can learn an awful lot about that segment, and you're not trying to be that. You're just looking for those segments that you, as a company, really resonate with, you gel with.
Yeah. This next one sounds like they're having a few sort of internal challenges because they're basically talking about it sounds like they've changed their brand name a few years ago, and people internally are still sort of adhering to the old brand and maybe the values that went with the old brand. Any tips for how that person can encourage the team to get on board with what they're planning now?
Oh, they're not alone in that. I've had to pry old fleece jackets with old logos out of people's hands years after the fact. It's about providing new value and a good purge. You have to purge all the old brand and messaging and really clean house a bit, but then give them something new to be excited about. in your brand toolkit, something new that's fun or a real productivity saver, that will make them look at the rest of the tools and embrace those. If it's swag, employee gear, in order to get rid of the old stuff, you're going to have to meet their needs and then some. The replacement fleece jacket and something else that would really spark some interest. So it's not an easy challenge. It takes a lot of consistent correction, on clarity of the message, standardization of brand. It's not an enviable challenge. It takes a lot of reinforcement.
Yeah, I hope that helps if that was your question, but it does sound like you're not alone. So stick at it, and I'm sure it will come through in the end. Just three more questions, Michele, and then we'll wrap things up. So we're getting fairly close to the hour. You mentioned in the presentation about leaders coming from a different place to their employees. So is there a way? So you're obviously the leader of your team. Is there a way that you can help your employees understand where you're coming from? As much as important it is for you to understand where they're coming from, what can you do vice versa?
Leaders tend to love change, have a higher tolerance for risk, think about money differently than the majority of the organization. The people who are most resistant to change are the people that keep the wheels on the bus. You value them because they're process-oriented, consistent, reliable, and geared toward compliance. You need to bring them along. So I think first is just recognizing the difference and being truthful about that. I think my employees laugh a little bit, like, I love change. We can laugh about that difference. But then turn the focus to what's it mean to them? What are their concerns? They can understand where I'm coming from, but they're much more concerned about where they're coming from. So it is worth my time to explore that, and to make sure that I am telling the story and laying out the action plan in their terms.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. This one's asking about scientific products and the tendency generally to sell scientific products based on features, attributes, and benefits to the customer. How to change the culture to selling these based on value, and how do you define the value of a scientific product?
Yeah, we're smart people who work with other smart people. So sometimes I think we don't feel like we have to spell it out, but it makes it that much more powerful. So I need them to take a step back for a minute and think like a 3-year-old. Why? Here's the spec, but why does anyone care? What is the end outcome of that? Sometimes we talk about performance that leads to throughput, but even then, what does increased throughput mean? Is that ability to scale? Is that hitting deadlines? What is that? You're looking for the next 3 steps. So you can be much clearer in your payoff. You can tie it to financial targets, to risk reduction, and something that has meaning to both your technical buyer, scientific buyer, but also the purchasing that they need to get through. You've got multiple business decision makers. If that helps you to tell a more value-focused story, broaden your audience a bit.
Perfect. One final question, but just before I ask that, Michele, just to draw everyone's attention once again to the handout section. If you want to have a look at the ebook that Michele was discussing earlier and understand a bit more about the research she's been doing, then do download that and check it out for yourselves. There are also plenty of other resources within there that can support you with your marketing. I've just popped up on the screen another call to action. We are coming towards the end of our financial year here at AZO, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of good offers on the table for anyone who's interested in learning a bit more about our solutions. Just click on that link there, and it will take you to a page where you can contact the team and take the conversation from there. Michele, final question before we wrap things up. what are your top 3 tips to unleash company culture?
Good question. One, I think decide what you're not very clearly. It's more important to decide what you're not than what you are. It'll crisp it up very much. Take a look at your star performers. What makes them great? What are the commonalities? What do you want to build upon? And then let your own people define the culture. I use tricks like company in 3 words, or even, and this is silly, but it works. If we were a vehicle, what would we be? People can articulate in those kind of questions. So you're looking for themes, and then you test it to see, is this what the market values? Is it what your customer values? And where do you want to go from here? What do you want to build on, and what do you want less of?
Yeah. Michele, like I said at the start, this is a big old topic, and I'm sure we could talk about it for hours. But thank you so much for sharing your expertise with myself and the audience for the last hour. I really would encourage everyone to download that ebook if you haven't done already. There's lots of really great stuff in there, so please do download that before you finish the webinar today. When you leave the room, there will be a survey that appears on your screen. If you could kindly take a couple of minutes just to give us your feedback, we'd really appreciate that. And we'll hopefully see you at the next webinar at the start of June. Thanks again, Michele. It's been a real pleasure, and look forward to seeing everyone again very soon.
Thank you. You too.